You're watching BCTV, Branford Community Television.
Before we begin this evening, I would like to say a few words, or actually welcome our sponsor, Kelly Bertucci from AT&T. They are the presenting sponsor of this evening's event, and they are also very, very generous members of the community. So, Kelly?
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. This is an incredible turnout. I'm so excited to see so many of you here and so many friendly faces. We are very proud to sponsor this evening's event, and I'd like to start by just saying a quick thank you to our candidates for taking time to be with us tonight, to participate in this debate, and more importantly, for their many years of public service and commitment to this local community. We at AT&T share that commitment to our local community, and that's exactly why we are sponsoring tonight's debate. The decisions that we have as voters in this next election are going to have a huge impact on our lives, on our economy, the education of our children, and our ability to grow jobs in this community. So this is very important, and I am so grateful to see so many of you here this evening, and encourage everyone to come out on November 6th and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, AT&T. I just realized I forgot one other member of the committee who was here. My husband, Tom Banish, who is former chairman. I apologize, Tom. Steve Mazzacane is our moderator. Steve Mazzacane is from, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the Branford 7 and also now the Guilford Atticus. I'm waiting for him to come into Madison and start an online site for us as well. Steve will be the moderator and will review the rules and then introduce the candidates. So, Steve.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you all for coming. This is the biggest turnout we have ever had for a debate, so thank you so much. And I think we have two candidates worthy of the turnout. First, before we get to the rules, we'd like to invite both of the candidates to the stage. Please introduce Cindy Cartier and Senator Ed Meyer. Tonight's debate, the rules for tonight will be fairly simple. We will have, each question will be asked. It will be 2 minutes to answer that question. There will be 2 minutes to respond to that question, and at least 1 minute rebuttal. We will continue as long as the conversation allows, and when it reaches that point, we'll go on to the next topic. And so we'll begin. The biggest issue either one of you will be facing when you get to the state legislature in a few months will be the next budget. It was a serious issue 2 years ago. We also have some serious issues coming this year. We have a report already from the comptroller that it's already $27 million in the red. There's some serious issues going forward. So the first question we have is this. When you walk in the first day, how do you address the next 2 years of a budget? We'll start the first question with Ed Meyer.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank the chambers. This is amazing. Are you sure you're all here for the debate and not for something else? My God, we haven't seen this before. We need to do it again. The 2013 budget will be a very significant step for us. Right now, we have a budget, an annual budget of about $20 billion. And a $27 million deficit is quite small in light of a $20 billion budget, annual budget. We're looking for increased revenues. This economy of Connecticut is gradually improving. Revenues are gradually improving. We're also looking at the legality of an internet sales tax. It's often called an Amazon tax. And that increasingly appears to be a legal possibility. So a combination of increased jobs, a possible internet sales tax, and some spending cuts will balance the budget. Spending cuts would be necessary, of course, if after any of the normal revenue increases, there is still a deficit. There are areas to cut in the Connecticut state budget, I assure you. One of my jobs was to be chair of the Children's Committee, and I oversaw the Department of Children and Families. That is a department that is overemployed, layered with people doing the same job. It has a children's facility, which in many ways is a wonderful children's hospital, Riverview Children's Hospital. But the cost, the last time I saw the cost, was $915,000 per child per year. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You could put a child in a group home at $175,000 a year. So we will look at this in January, February. We'll see the extent that there is any deficit, and we will balance the budget early in the year.
Selectman Cartier.
Sure. First of all, I'd like to thank the Chambers as well for hosting this debate tonight, and Steve for moderating, and all of you folks to be here. I think they're here because of the food, right? The food's really good. I actually got married here at Woodwinds, so it's a special place in my heart. I think you're going to hear right off the bat how Senator Meyer and I differ, because I don't think we have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And the frustration to me is I sat up here 2 years ago, and we talked about the $3.5 billion deficit, and we talked about the challenges we're facing in the state, and they increased revenue. We had the biggest tax increase in Connecticut state history, but what did they also do? They turned around and increased spending by 5.3%. So the bottom line is, what do we need to do going to this next budget? We need to cut spending right off the bat. We shouldn't even be talking about revenue or talking about increasing taxes in any way, shape, or form. We need to look at what we're doing with the spending piece. We faced that in Guilford. I've been on the Board of Selectmen there for 5 years, as many of you know. When I got onto the board, we were looking at 5 to 7% tax increases for year after year, going back many years, 5 to 7% budget increases in our town budget. Over the past 3 years, since we took over the leadership, we have reduced those budgets to under 3% this year, and next year we're looking at under 2%. How do we do that? Consolidation of departments, attrition through, job reduction through attrition, planning, folks, planning. We've done long-range planning, capital planning. That's not being done anywhere at the state level. So those are some of the things we need to absolutely do going forward. The areas we have to look at are cutting. I met with the Sarah board a couple years ago and have continued conversations with them. This is just one example. Sarah has told me it costs them about $100,000 to take care of an individual they put into a group home and the like. It costs the state $300,000 to $500,000. So I do agree with Senator Meyer when we talk about DCF and we talk about our nonprofits. We need to be contracting out more to them. Senator Meyer talks about Riverview. We had the benefit of meeting with each other last week for a forum up in Durham, and he spoke about how he challenged then Governor Rell on this issue. But I say, what have you done since then? Because he challenged her then, he's had his governor in place for the last 2 years, and still nothing's being done in terms of that spending. So before we even talk about revenue, and it'd be great if revenue comes in, it'd be wonderful if businesses came into our state, because that's what we want, and I've got ideas for that as well. But right off the bat, we have to talk about the spending. Yes.
Senator Meyer.
Thank you. Let me tell you some of the spending cuts we've done in the last year, and those spending cuts are going to grow. First of all, we did a 30% reduction of state agencies by consolidation. Secondly, we eliminated a public employee bonus, what we call the longevity bonus for new public employees. Third, through conservation and greater use of natural gas, we've had a reduction in our energy costs of about 10% in the last 18 months in Connecticut, and that's a very important development for us. Further, we've had a Medicaid reduction by focusing much more on less expensive home health care. Home health care instead of nursing homes. And then we've had a reduction in our prison population from about 20,000 inmates to down to 16,000. And that's been by taking a new look at our sentencing structure and using alternative forms of sentences for nonviolent offenders. That's a saving of $40,000 per inmate per year.
Selectman Cartier.
I get to respond?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I disagree on a couple of things there. Part of the problem that we do when we look at cutting spending and what the state's doing is, let's talk about home health care. Do I think in most instances that folks are better off in their homes? Absolutely. But what we've done in our state, it's very interesting. And UConn came out with a study that showed in the next 15 years we're going to have a problem making sure that we have the resources to take care of our elderly. Specifically because we're essentially putting our nursing homes out of business, we're not going to have the number of employees and the like to take care of our seniors. So do I believe that seniors should have a choice to be in their home? Absolutely. But my dad who's here tonight, I'll give you an example. He's a very social person. No surprise there, I take after him. But he would not be someone who would enjoy being homebound and not being able to have socialization. So for him, home health care may not be the best option, and a nursing home, should that come to it, Dad, I'm not going to put you in a nursing home anytime soon, but a nursing, should that come to it, that might be the best choice for him. And again, it's about choices. So part of the problem, when we look at reducing things, we also have to look at the long-term effects. The prison issue, we all know what's happened with that program with the nonviolent offenders. The folks are being released. We had a gentleman that murdered someone in Meriden. So, and we've had someone in that department who's testified that there's some serious problems with that program. So on its face, sounds like a great program, but I think, we can't be too hasty in the areas we're looking at cutting spending. We have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's meaningful. And despite Senator Meyer's claims that we've cut this spending, remember folks, 5.3% still increased from last year. So maybe it would have been 10%, but 5.3 is still unacceptable.
The issue, we talked about the long-term concern about Medicaid and some of the senior issues that we're going to have. In a report that came out October 1st from Kevin Lembo, the comptroller, it already is estimating that we're going to have a $100 million shortfall for Medicaid. So it's a problem right now. Where do you start? The first day when you go into office, how do you address that issue right now, not just long-term? Senator Meyer?
Well, you address it as I think in part as we're doing very strenuously with a new focus on home health care. That's such a significant thing in the country and in Connecticut that Guilford and Branford have started stay-at-home programs. And particularly the Branford program is going forward, and it's encouraging people to stay in their homes by getting services in their homes. When you do that and you save the $100,000 plus of each year for every person in a nursing home, you have a tremendous saving. And so that is the direction I'm taking. I was very pleased to be one of the founders of the Stay Put program in Guilford.
I think the way that you have to deal with it, you have to look at spending in other areas to make sure we're properly funding the program. And again, I don't disagree with the home health care program. What my only concern is a study that came out from UConn that talked about where we're going to be 15 years from now. And if we are solving a problem today and creating a problem 10 years from now, we haven't really solved the fiscal problem, and we haven't properly taken care of our elderly. I mean, let's face it, folks, AARP just came out. Connecticut is the worst state to retire in, and there's a multitude of reasons, but we don't need to make it any worse for our seniors going forward. So I believe strongly that home health care is absolutely the way to go in specific instances for folks, and we need to have that choice, but we need to make sure we're taking care of the other areas. So to work on that deficit, we have to look at other areas we could cut.
Okay, and what are some of those other areas that you look at?
As I said before, looking at the you want me to answer? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Looking at the nonprofit areas, also looking at efficiencies in the departments. One of the things that we did in Guilford was how we do purchasing. We were able to save thousands of dollars in using an in-house purchasing agent and consolidating purchasing needs and the like. I've talked to a number of state employees, and they have said there's so many areas we can save what we call the low-hanging fruit, administrative costs and the like. So just right off the bat there's savings that can be realized.
Okay. Senator Meyer, what was prompt?
Nothing.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to a topic that we all can relate to, especially in the chamber, and that is of jobs. So this second question starts with Selectman Cartier. A very basic question. How do you create a job?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's not the government's role to create jobs, but we have to create a business-like environment, a positive environment for businesses to foster and grow. Number one, 3 easy steps. We need to make it more affordable for businesses to do business in the state, cost-wise. Both the taxes it costs for them to be here, and also for them to hire employees. One of the things you'll hear a lot from businesses is the costs are astronomical, the electricity, the gas, the energy, those costs. The cost of doing business in the tax, the corporate tax, the local property taxes, but also they're having a challenge actually securing employees into the jobs to get folks to work in some of the more skilled labor because folks can't afford to live in the state, so there's a void there. So when businesses look to come to Connecticut, they look for those types of things. In fact, I spent almost 8 years with Nationwide Insurance Company, and we had a regional office in Connecticut. When they consolidated Connecticut, New York, and Pennsylvania, and they said, which state should we consolidate and go to, Connecticut wasn't even up there because the cost to do business here is so great on a number of levels. So that's the first step. The second step is our regulations. And I know people say that word's overutilized, streamline our regulations. But I will tell you, I spent the last almost 8 years working as a regulatory attorney, dealing with state agencies throughout New England. And Connecticut is one of the most challenging states to do business in on a multitude of levels. For example, one of my roles was to help put our product in the market, our insurance policies. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of accident forgiveness, those types of things. They'll put products on the market that are beneficial for the customers. In any other state in New England, it'll take you about a month to get that product through, approved, and out to the market. Connecticut's anywhere from 8 months to a year. And the challenge with that is, yes, there's legal processes that as a company you can put it out to market, but the risk is 8 to 10 months down the road or to a year down the road when the department says, you know, this is not going to work for us, we're not approving your policy or your new platform here. The challenge with that is now you've spent costs in putting a product to market. So these are the regulatory challenges. So the second stage is regulatory, and the third stage is to create a business-like environment. And I'll hold
We'll
on.
get back to that. Senator Meyer, how do you create a job?
Yes, I've been in the private sector. I was administrative partner of my own law firm for many years. And in the public sector, of course, I've been a legislator both in New York and in Connecticut. And as I've tried to focus on how you build jobs, it really comes down to three things. The first is to reduce business costs. And the big business costs in Connecticut are health insurance, energy, and taxes. One reason I voted against the governor's historic tax increase last year was that it was the wrong time and it was an impediment to business, not an encouragement to business. The second thing you do is you reduce unnecessary mandates of government. You, in effect, let government get out of the way. The CBIA recently, in a newsletter, complimented the General Assembly on doing that. The CBIA report says, referring to the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, the agency has begun accelerating the permitting process, leaning its operations and increasing its focus on assistance as an effective, efficient tool to maximize regulatory compliance without interference. So that's the second. The third is to provide job incentives for businesses to grow. And we have done that with a monumental jobs program called the Small Business Express Package. It gives direct grants, it gives low-interest loans, it provides tax credits to hire unemployed people, it provides job training. I've been going across the Senate District, as some of you may have seen from the newspapers in the last couple of weeks, visiting with companies that have benefited from this really significant jobs package. And again, CBIA in a recent report complimented the General Assembly for doing it. And they complimented the General Assembly for expanding the jobs package in the special session last June, when for reasons that I cannot explain, every Republican voted no. We expanded the jobs benefits from companies with 50 employees to companies with 100 employees. That added 3,600 new businesses to the program. They said the Republicans said they didn't have time enough to read the bill, and they voted no.
Selectman Cartier?
Sure. Just to follow up what I was saying earlier. So as I indicated, first of all, with regard to regulations, Senator Meyer talks about streamlining regulations and making them easier. His record of almost a decade shows he's done just the opposite. Particularly the legislation that he co-sponsored and put out there, the paid sick leave, that was the most onerous regulatory burden on our businesses that you can have in the 12th district. And also there was the unintended consequence that it had on our nonprofit agencies as well as our municipalities, that we had to then incur the costs as a result of that legislation, which I have to say some of his colleagues here in the 12th district did not vote for it. So that's first of all. So when we talk about streamlining, you don't put additional burdens on businesses like forcing mattress recycling and things like that. That doesn't create a business-friendly environment, which is the third step. You ask any business in the state of Connecticut, and I'm also a small business owner. Many of you know my husband and I own a car wash here in Branford. Anytime you have to deal with the state, I don't care what department it is a challenge to deal with them. I spent about a month ago an hour and a half on the phone trying to recover a refund on my corporate entity tax. It is a challenge for anybody to do business. There's not a healthy business environment here. And I will also say, regarding to the CBIA, it's interesting that they gave a thumbs up to the legislature. They did not give a thumbs up to my opponent in endorsement.
Would you like to respond?
Well, I don't, as far as I know, CBIA has not endorsed Selectwoman Cartier, as far as I know.
No,
So
but they endorsed you 2 years ago, but they didn't endorse you now.
They did. Let's talk just for a moment about paid sick leave, a very controversial bill. Most companies do pay sick leave because they don't want workers serving them food or serving them in some other way when they got the flu. Indeed, my office called Cindy's employer, Nationwide Insurance, to find out what a person in her position, Assistant General Counsel, gets in the way of paid sick days. And Nationwide Insurance told us that an assistant general counsel gets 5 weeks of paid sick leave or vacation or personal days. We looked at the town of Guilford. We discovered that the employees of the town of Guilford get 10 days paid sick leave. Paid sick leave makes sense. It was polled by the Quinnipiac poll, and 75% of Connecticut residents polled supported paid sick leave. So I don't think it has been an impediment. We've called several employers to find out if they've been hurt by paid sick leave, and the feedback was, if we have an employee who goes off on paid sick leave, we double up. We don't hire somebody else. We don't actually have a cost from paid sick leave. So I think it's a good program. I feel good about it. And I think it's good health and good employment.
I think the problem with it, first of all, the bill itself, it actually impacted our seasonal employees in town, so it did cost us money. And Jim Lamb, I know, is here from Sarah a few months ago. Pat Woodlitz, who's also here. Noreen Coke-Bruto is also here. We sat in front of the Human Health Services, and a number of them expressed frustration with that legislation because of the negative impact it had on the nonprofits and how they run their business. But what it says is what I said before. It's a message you send to the businesses. Let the businesses run as they will. Let them decide. Yes, there are a number of businesses in the state that do offer paid sick leave, and it's part of the jobs, it's part of the nature of the business. Let them dictate, and that's all goes back to creating a business-friendly state. We aren't the 44th worst state to do business in for a reason, and it's because of things like this, the over-regulatory environment, the problem with the costs in the state, and the like. You know, this is what's happening, and I think, you know, what we need up there are folks that can appreciate this, making sure they're taking care of the constituency in the district, but also making sure they're creating an environment for healthfulness in our economic environment going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a totally new climate, I'm going to tell you, in Hartford than we had before. We have a governor who's really trying to change the economy, bring about an economic revival, cut costs, 30% cut in state agencies by consolidation. This is a new day in Hartford. And one of the things that's driving me to seek re-election is I want to be part of this revolution. It's a great one.
One of the questions I'd like to raise, Senator Meyer, that you raised, your third point was on the jobs bill and the investment or expenditure, depending on where you stand, that the government is putting into hiring new jobs. Part of the First 5 program was some large incentives that we're giving to companies to either stay here or to move to Connecticut. I want to give the example of Bridgewater, which is a hedge fund which was in Westport and moved to Stamford. The state, offered them about $115 million if they reach certain incentives in tax breaks over the next 15, 20 years. They are moving from Westport to Stamford. Is that a good use of taxpayer dollars?
I don't know. I was a critic of investing state funds, taxpayer money, in Bridgewater. It's the largest hedge fund in the world. Its CEO gets paid in the billions with a B, compensation. So I went to the Office of Planning and Management, OPM, which controls these funds, and said, what were you doing in giving that money to the largest hedge fund in the world? And the officer in charge of that funding is a man named Ron Angelo. Ron Angelo told me that Bridgewater will be doubling the number of its employees. And secondly, that when the state came in, and this was not a move by the General Assembly, this was the executive branch. When the state came in through the executive branch and offered these inducements, Bridgewater was looking at space in both New Jersey and New York. And so we were in danger, according to Ron Angelo, of losing a major employer, and we held on to them by offering those incentives.
So you would support doing that?
I don't know if I would. If I was absolutely convinced that they were leaving the state with an employer of that size, with the economic problems Connecticut has, I would have supported it. But I was not privy to that information until after the fact.
Selectman Cartier?
You know, I'm not against, and it's part of what I talked before about incentivizing businesses. You need to do that, to incentivize companies in a multitude of ways. The problem is, by doing just that, by offering companies millions of dollars
to stay here, particularly large corporations, when it's really 80% of our employers in the state of Connecticut are small businesses, and that we're paying businesses like Cigna and Bridgewater, although this is the first I'm hearing that they were going to potentially leave, companies like that are already existing here to stay. That's a concern that wouldn't have gone otherwise. Again, we were at a chamber event last week, and a gentleman who's a broker for a number of smaller companies talked about the companies are taking the incentivization packages, which they should because they're offered, many of whom were already going to hire people, many of them already were going to do various expansions. So it really didn't create anything new. And it goes back to what I was saying before, to have sort of the one leg on a chair. I mean, when you take a three-legged chair, and if that's the only element you're doing, and you're not taking care of the cost to run in the state, you're not taking care of the business environment, you're still going to be under the 8 ball, and it's not going to work. So I think that the incentivized process program on its own, without doing all the other things I talked about earlier, is not going to put us in the position, it's not going to create the economic revival that we want, and that's going to be the problem.
Yeah, just in quick rebuttal, in this Senate district, about 12 businesses in the last few months have taken the benefits of the Small Business Express package of benefits that we're offering. That's created 148 new jobs in the last few months in this Senate district. I visited recently one of those new companies. It's in Guilford. It's called Grow Home Organics. The CEO and founder is a man named John Daniels. Mr. Daniels said to us that but for the state grant of $83,500, that's what his figure was, $83,500, they never would have been able to start. And here they are running an organics business with a half a dozen employees producing a wonderful natural product. I think it's working. And I think we need to, no risk, no reward. We've got to be a little bit in the risk in order to get the reward and change this state around.
Well, I think 9% unemployment, we're back up. We were 7.9 a year ago, 8.1 earlier this summer, 9%. It's not working. It's not working. And I'm glad we might have a business here or there that grows, and that's wonderful. But we have to look at the program at large, and it's clearly not working when we have record numbers of 9% unemployment, higher than even the national average, which is supposedly going in the opposite direction. I'm not sure, depending on who you listen to.
Well, just in brief rebuttal, the recent survey indicates that 23 other states have also had increasing unemployment, not declining unemployment, but actually some increasing unemployment. But by and large, we are in a positive phase in our economy. Cindy so often, she's an insurgent, so she's attacking, I understand that. But I cut out some headlines recently in the papers, in the Current and in the Register. This one says, state in top 10 for growth. This one says, housing permits in state up 45%. This one says, angel investing jumps sharply after tech tax credit expansion. That's one of the things we did. This one says, job openings hit 4-year high. This is the beginning of an economic revival. It's been long in coming. We've suffered because it's taken so long, but we're doing it. And to be entirely negative about it is not being accurate.
One rebuttal, go ahead.
I'm not negative, folks. I'm just stating the facts. It's the reality of where we're at. And, this is my state. I was born and raised here. My great-grandparents came here from Italy in the turn of the century. 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, we had no income tax. We had jobs aplenty. We had, the cost to live in the state was much more affordable. We fast forward, we're looking at record unemployment numbers. Folks leave, I've knocked on thousands of doors, and again, it's about my district. That's what it's about for me. And folks here have told me in record numbers that they're either leaving the state, some have already, actually bought homes elsewhere, they're selling their homes here, or they're planning to leave, or they just can't afford to stay here. And I've never heard it as bad as I've heard it now. So it's not a question of me being negative, and this is why I'm running, because I see the challenges we're facing, and this is my state, and I want it back again. So for me, it's not about being negative, it's not about attacking, it's about having a debate on the issues, and me putting forth my plan, my vision for where we need to go in the state, and clearly seeing things, I think, without colored glasses, but seeing them for what they truly are.
Now, the studies and the reports I've just shown you in the newspaper reflect that we are in recovery, in an economic recovery. And don't forget, two things. We have been in the largest recession since the Great Depression, all over the world. Europe is still in terrible shape. They're still in recession. We also have been in a period of over 20 years in Connecticut of economic stagnation. No new net jobs in Connecticut in over 20 years. We've had governors who have not proposed anything to move the economy. We now have a governor who's doing this, and I admire him for that, even though he's sometimes prickly.
And I clearly think that's not the case, and I bet if you took a poll in this room right now, a majority of the people would feel that we're not in an economic revival, we're not in the recovery phase. And I think the facts and the numbers just establish over and over again. Last year we were 37th worst state to do business in, this year we're 44th. That's not a recovery to me. That's saying we're heading in the wrong direction. Last year we had 7.9% unemployment, this year we're at 9%. That's not a recovery. That's going in the wrong direction. So the numbers speak for themselves.
But let's move on to the matter of health care. And this is something that over the next 2 years, you guys will probably be responding to possibly something that happens tonight or in the election in a few months, and that is who wins. One proposal is to repeal Obamacare and to allow the states to come up with their own health care plans. We'll start with you, Cindy. If that were to happen, and Connecticut was responsible for creating its own plan, how would you create a health care plan in Connecticut?
Well, first and foremost, I would work, my background in insurance would put me in a perfect position to help to do that. And my legal background in that regard is I would work with the Department of Insurance and a number of groups that would be leaders in this right, and work with them to collectively, because I'm all about collaboration and collectively working with groups to put together a plan that would work for the state without impairing the areas to turn the things around that I talked about earlier, without increasing our spending, without making the job market more difficult, but to put us in a better position to do that. And that's what I'd be looking to do.
Senator Meyer?
Well, if the Affordable Health Care Act, the so-called Obamacare, was defeated by a Republican Congress and a Republican president, I think what we would be doing in Connecticut is what the General Assembly did just this year, and that is we approved something called a health exchange program. A health exchange program is in effect a market for private health products, where we, the consumer, can go in and we can look at the market, we can decide what particular insurance product, health insurance product we want, and we can sign up with that product. I favor choice. I think we're going to get better health, and I'm at an age where I need good health and need good choice.
No comment.
Okay. Let's move on to something else that impacts jobs, and that is the ability to have a qualified workforce. And we've had from scandals to all types of funding issues in the last even just few weeks with our education system in Connecticut. But Senator Meyer, where do you start to make sure and ensure that businesses here have qualified employees to choose from?
Well, we were talking about the Small Business Express. We created at 3 of our community colleges manufacturing centers, 3 of them. The closest one is Housatonic in Bridgeport. Another part of the Small Business Express package is we're trying to link up current jobs with education. And we haven't done a very good job in that in this country or indeed in Connecticut. The technologies are changing so quickly that we're not properly educating our kids. We're now onto that. And our school reform package that passed this past spring headed us in that direction by connecting students with current employment opportunities. We also, in that package, focused on reading, and particularly being able to read by the time you're in the 3rd grade, so there's a K through 3. We also focused on this horrible gap we have between the achievement of suburban schools and urban schools. There's so little accountability in the urban schools. We put accountability in there. We put accountability for teachers. Teachers will now be accounted and look at and have job performance reports once a year. Connecticut never had that before. So that is really starting to change. It's a small step. It's a big step in the right direction in terms of doing, as you're saying, linking job opportunities with education.
Cartier?
I think, first of all, in order to get our qualified workforce here, as we know, our students are not coming and staying here because of the affordability. So first and foremost, we need to get our fiscal house in order. and make the state more affordable so that we can encourage our young people to want to stay and continue to work here. That's first of all. The other thing, and this is an interesting thing, I've spent time on the Board of Education in Guilford, and we have the wonderful blessings of tremendous schools in the 12th district, and with high ratios of students going off to college, and we encourage our children to go to college. But going to college is not right for every student, and I think what's happening now is we're realizing that both in our individual families, in our homes, in our state, and we need to remove the stigma, because back when I was growing up here, a lot of kids went to Eli Whitney and tech schools, and it was not a negative thing to do that. To want to go to school to be an auto mechanic or a carpenter and the like was not necessarily considered a bad profession, and let's figure, try to get a plumber today. It's one of the most challenging things. I think what we need to do is change the climate within the educational realm. I think I would agree with Senator Meyer, but what we need to do is to invest in our tech schools in the state, and we need to educate our communities and our parents that these are viable options for children, for our students, that maybe college isn't a viable option. I mean, how many times kids go to school and they have no idea what they want to do, and they get there and it's not a good fit for them. So we need to encourage this alternative educational opportunity.
Senator Meyer?
I'm probably a minority view here, but that's all right. I don't think that our suburban schools in Connecticut are doing what they should be doing. I think we're falling behind in the race in the country and falling by in the race in the world. Connecticut schools were traditionally in the top 10 of the 50 states in the United States. We've now fallen lower than 20 in ranking in the United States. With respect to the sciences, mathematics, engineering, all our schools across the country as well as in Connecticut are falling globally. We're putting ourselves in a position of not being able to compete in the future, and we're the great technological country of the world, most innovative in the world, but we're losing a battle here. And the more that all of us in government as well as citizens recognize that, the more you will encourage us to set higher standards and bring about better performance so that we're better competitors in this country and in the world.
Well, I guess I slightly disagree, because having a child in the school system and having served on the board and knowing what's going on locally and communicating with my colleagues and peers and friends in other towns, I would say our schools in this district rival. Can they improve? Absolutely. But part of the way we get there is to remove a number of the unfunded mandates, to remove some of the overly required testing mechanisms that we're forcing the teachers to do, so we're dictating their entire day in teaching the students to test, teaching them to test, and that's not helping. So if we're really looking to make the broad changes and the bold changes in this regard, we would allow more autonomy in the schools that are high performing, like our schools in the 12th district. So I can give a whole range in that area to seek improvements in that regard. But I have to say, taking it to task, our schools are some of the best in the state.
Oh gosh, I don't think we're going to ever change the urban schools of New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford, Waterbury, and so forth unless we have some mandates. I don't think we're ever going to do it just by letting them do their own thing. There's a total lack of accountability. Just walk into one of those urban schools and you'll see what I mean. We need to have mandates with respect to the rigor of the curriculum, with respect to teacher performance, with respect to testing. We're not going to change that. We're going to always have this huge underachievement gap in the urban schools unless we get tough and demand accountability.
Well, it's not my job as the next state senator to represent New Haven, Hartford, and Stamford. It's my job to represent the folks in this district, and that's what I'll do, number one. Number two, if those schools need more rigorous mandates, then create reforms that do that. But don't put those reforms on the backs of our good schools here in the 12th district, which I'm going to hopefully represent.
And Senator Meyer, let's talk about the needs of... Let's talk about the needs of the shoreline towns, because one of the things we've heard election after election for as long as we've had elections is that Branford, Guilford, and Madison are not getting their share of ECS funds. One of the discussions that's being taken place now is that 7 of the last 10 years we've not been fully funded when it comes to kids with special needs, and that's even being discussed as being further reduced. What do you say to 3 towns that are really getting the short end of the stick as money is going to those larger cities?
What I tell them, and some of you have heard me say, I'm very frustrated by it. I've introduced bills that would correct that difference. I introduced one bill that said that every student will get state aid of a minimum of $1,000. Right now, our students in the towns represented in this room get about $400 maybe from the state. I would increase that to $1,000. I also had a bill that provided that the state would pay a minimum of 10% of the cost of educating a child in public school. I've also called for the state to pick up the entire cost of special ed, because after all, special education was a mandate first of the federal government and then of the state government. None of these things are getting through, and I'm very frustrated by it, and I will continue to do it. What I do instead is try to bring the bacon in some other ways, through steep grants. Just in the last week, I helped to get a $500,000 grant from Madison for the beautification of its downtown areas, taking the electrical wires, putting them underground, new lighting, new traffic median. It's going to be terrific. Got $500,000 for an emergency emergency operations center in the middle of the state in Killingworth in my district. Those are the kind of things that, and I've done this repeatedly with my colleagues. See, Representative Pat Widlitz is here. She and I have worked together in bringing a lot home to Guilford and to Branford.
Folks, Branford 6 cents, North Branford 38 cents, Madison 7 cents, Killingworth 19 cents, Guilford 9 cents, Durham 28 cents. That's how much money comes back to each town in this district for every dollar goes to Hartford. When you compare that to our inner cities, you're talking $2, $3, $4 a piece. Do I believe that our inner cities need more resources? I would not challenge that. Do I think we should get equal to what the inner cities get? No, because we don't have some of the challenges they have. However, we're not getting our fair share. And with all due respect, Senator Meyer, I appreciate the efforts that you've tried. Maybe it's about time somebody else get up there and have a go at it, because it's been ineffective. You have a majority the entire time you've been up there, and you've enjoyed a supermajority during part of that. So despite that, it's not getting done. It's time somebody else give it a try.
But you both talk about raising money to our shoreline towns with not hurting the inner cities. That means more money. Where is that more money coming from?
That's the question I wanted to put to the selectwoman, because she is saying she wants to raise money.
Well, your bills do the same thing.
I'll be happy to chat about that, but I'd like to hear what she would like to do. She's against spending. She wants to reduce taxes.
I didn't say reduce taxes. Wait a minute.
How is she going to pay to bring more money to Branford, Guilford, and Madison if she wants to cut taxes and reduce spending?
First of all, I didn't say cut taxes. Remember what I started out by saying? Of course I want to ultimately cut taxes. What I said is I want to talk about spending. I'm talking about reducing spending and then reducing it so much that we can reapportion it in other areas. So I'm talking about reducing spending overall and reapportioning it in the areas that it needs to go. I'm not talking about leaving those dollars in the inner cities the way they are. Some needs to come back to us. I said that they do need to get a little more than us, but I'm not talking about they need to get that much more. Some of it needs to come back to us.
Okay, she's talking like some of the presidential candidates, vagaries about spending cuts. You can't do that. When you're in elected office, you have to be able to know what you're going to cut, and you've got to be very specific. In the Connecticut state budget, we have made specific spending cuts that I referred to before, and that's what you have to do to be a responsible legislator.
Actually, I've talked about specific cuts. I've talked about the nonprofits. I've talked about administrative cuts that I would make. But one of the things I will absolutely do when I get up there is I'm not going to wait for the governor to give me his budget. I said this there 2 years ago. I would be looking to start revamping that budget from day one. It's exactly what I did on every board I've served on. And folks, I have a record on every board I've served on for reducing costs on those boards. I have a record in the nonprofit sector doing the same thing. I have a record in business of doing the same thing. So I think my record speaks for itself of the kind of senator I'll be when I get to Hartford. I think you can count on that.
Selectwoman Cartier has a record since 2008 of voting for every Guilford town tax increase and every Guilford spending increase.
That's incorrect. The first year I was on the board, I voted against it. So
I didn't say 2007. I said since 2008.
And also,
in the last let me just finish. In the last 5 years, we did a careful review of this. You voted for every spending increase and every tax increase in the town of Guilford.
First of all, I don't vote for a tax increase. You know that. I'm on the Board of Selectmen. But second of all, what we did do is I said when I started this, we were looking at 5 to 7% tax increases. We were under 3%. We're reducing the increases. I didn't say we're going to have zero spending at the state level. I said I want to reduce the spending at the state level. I've reduced it in Guilford. And that's what we've done, and that's what I will do in Hartford.
Okay. Let's move on to the topic of the environment. And being 3 towns along the shoreline, this is a key one for a lot of our people watching. A couple things have happened in the last year. Certainly we've had Irene, but one of the things that brought a lot of attention to was sea level rise along the shore, and obviously the shore is a significant tax base that we have to worry about long term. Also, something happened in August this year with the Millstone power plant, and it closed down for 12 days because the temperature of the seawater that keeps it cool was too high. Obviously, this is the first power plant, nuclear plant in the country for this to happen to. So with sea levels going up and so many of our towns being on the shore, and obviously the issue with power, how do we begin a long-term process of solving this problem, Senator Meyer?
Well, maybe some of you have heard we formed a task force of legislators and folks, not non-legislators, to deal with this. Representative Woodwinds, Representative Lonnie Reed, and I are members of that task force. Representative Lonnie Reed, in fact, is co-chairman of the task force. We're holding public hearings regularly. Many of them are covered by the newspapers. And we're addressing the question of the environment on the shoreline and energy on the shoreline. In this spring, I sponsored a bill, a major bill, with respect to looking at the problems of rising sea level, and the scientists, the objective scientists, tell us that we're definitely in a period of rising sea levels, like 9 inches in the last 60 years, the figure that I read. And storms are making life more difficult for us, as Irene did. And so we looked at our Coastal Management Act and we modified it. We modified it not with a mandate, but with a request to the shoreline towns of Connecticut to, in the future, build back from the water or up from the water or use natural vegetation and dunes as a form of stopping wave erosion. These are very significant steps, first steps, in trying to meet the emergencies. We also held hearings you may have read about with respect to the performance of Connecticut Light and Power. It was abysmal. They were not prepared for either the snowstorm or Irene. We put in a series of tough performance standards for the utilities, and we topped it off with strict penalties if those standards are not performed. And those penalties, under the law we passed, will have to be paid, not by we ratepayers, but by the equity of the utility company itself.
Cartier?
Which ultimately we end up paying because they pass the cost down to us, but that's another story. I have to say I do applaud the work that they've done in a reactionary perspective, Senator Meyer and his colleagues, and that actually goes across the aisle. He only mentioned the Democratic colleagues, but there are also a number of Republican colleagues on that as well. So we talk about bipartisanship. I think the only way you're going to have effective legislation in that area is to have it bipartisan. So I do think the reactionary approach has been a good one. And they're studying it, which I like. I like that they're giving it the time and they're having hearings and they're being inclusionary to the citizens in the towns, which is key. It's interesting, about 8 years ago, the then insurance commissioner had meetings with folks on the shoreline and insurance carriers that talked about and individuals talked about the lack of affordability of insurance coverage, and the insurance companies talked a lot about the reasons why and what they were facing in these eventual storms. Unfortunately, despite all the efforts that the companies were trying to get the legislature and the department to look at, unfortunately nothing was done until we had the storm. So at least I'm glad that something's being done now. But most importantly, what I'm very concerned about, though, is being on the Planning and Zoning Commission. One of the things that you have to make sure you do, and we did a great job rezoning Route 1 East and West and balancing out commercial development, property owners' rights, environmental issues, land preservation, open space. Got to balance all that, right? Go back to my three-legged chair again. We want to make sure that as we're putting any legislation in, we're not creating a de facto eminent domain effect where we're taking folks' property. And, that's a concern I have, is that you do want to make sure that folks are being responsible, that we're not going to have the costs ultimately borne on us as a community because of this issue. But I think you also have to bring the insurance discussion, this insurance piece into the discussion. And provided you do that, and there's a multitude of ways to make insurance more affordable on the coast, that will also help alleviate some of the problems we're facing without having to sort of take the right. So I appreciate the approach they're taking, and we need to look at it even broader, and we need to continue to do that. It's too bad the storm had to happen. So I would be looking to do things more proactively.
Let me say that I forgot the very important contribution to our Shoreline Task Force of Representative Noreen Colaruda, who's here tonight, and she's a major contributor to our work. I agree with the Selectwoman on insurance. We got major complaints from our constituents about poor insurance coverage. Those with homeowners insurance after Irene were not protected on water damage at all, and some of them didn't understand that. We need to clarify insurance standards. One of the public hearings that our Shoreline Task Force recently held was with insurance carriers, insurance companies, talking to us about the complex issues with respect to insurance coverage of extreme weather. And we're going to address that in the 2013 session.
Okay. I'd like to ask a question that involves every level of politics, and we'll start with Selectman Cartier. When you get to Hartford, especially if Republicans remain in the minority, it's going to be crucial to get something done to work with the other side. Can you give us an example of a time that you've worked with the other party and to make something positive happen for constituents?
I can give a multitude of examples. Most of my career in municipal government has been in the minority party. Despite that, I've been able to get a number of things done. When I first got onto the Board of Selectmen, as we started reviewing our budgets and the increases and the like, one of the areas that we were facing challenges as many municipalities and private sectors, healthcare costs. Our healthcare costs were rising astronomically. So I initiated a wellness program that I co-chair with the Human Resource Director. We've had employees that serve on the committee, both town and Board of Ed employees. We have had fitness classes at reduced or no cost to the employees. We've brought health fairs. We've gotten the sponsorship of our insurance carrier. We have had fitness wellness seminars each month, and we put out newsletters and the like. Over the past 4.5 years, we are showing a reduction in healthcare costs. There are additional reasons for this as well, but this is a complement to the overall good management in the town. The net effect of this also is that this entire program that I initiated and started has been at no cost to the taxpayer in Guilford. What it also did is it joined us up with businesses in the town. So we've helped support our local businesses that are wellness businesses, whether they're local gyms, physicians, chiropractors, and the like. We've been able to engage them, get them involved in town issues and vice versa. So it's been a win-win program for everybody at that level. So that's one example, and there's been a number of others.
Senator Meyer?
Yeah, we are increasingly, as the Congress, unable to get together. But we've done some good things together. I chair the Environment Committee, and most of the legislation the Environment Committee puts out is supported on a bipartisan basis. The ranking member of the Environment Committee, that ranking means the top Republican, was Andrew Rohrback, who's now running for Congress, a major environmental advocate. And we worked extremely well together. And before him, the ranking member of the Environment Committee was John McKinney from Fairfield County. Again, another very pro-environment kind of person. In October of last year, we passed the first jobs package for small businesses. Virtually I think there was only one Republican who voted no in each of the House. We were together. But what's happened since then is disturbing. Tea Party members of the General Assembly are coming in. The second jobs package, which CBIA praised us for enacting, didn't have one Republican vote. That vote was taken last June. We discovered a major science laboratory called Jackson Laboratory with a great bioscience or genetics program, offering up to 6,000 new jobs and a new way to deal with our health through genetics. And we invested in that company, Jackson Laboratory, and every Republican voted no. So there's good times. We do get together sometimes, but the unfortunate trend has been that we're not getting together enough of the times. And part of the reason you can tell is from the differences of opinion you're hearing here tonight, where I'm saying, in effect, we are gradually changing this economy in Connecticut, and the Selectwoman is saying we're the worst ever. And when you take those attitudes and you bring them together in Hartford, you don't get action.
Well, actually, I'm not saying that. These studies, the numbers, the folks out there are saying that. So I'm not creating this. This is not my wish. This is not what I'm saying. That's number one. Number two, it is unfortunate that folks can't get together. But part of what we do so well in our municipalities, Noreen and I have talked about this. She was a former selectman in town. I've spoken to selectmen on both sides of the fence in the other town, is that we work together. So, you know, for me, it is I'm not there, so I can't say what's going on, but in speaking to some of the representatives on both sides of the aisle, what's happening is they're not allowing the exchange of ideas. And the only way you get to great legislation, the only way you get to good stuff is to exchange ideas. You know, Senator Meyer, it's not your way or the highway. And I'd be the last one to say that my ideas are 100% right. But my ideas come from collaboration and working with other folks, whether it's in government, whether it's in nonprofits, whether it's in the the private sector. That's where you create greatness, is working together. So, you know, I can tell you what I will be like up there is exactly what I've been like all along in my entire career. That you can guarantee is that I will be working with everybody across the aisle, and that's the kind of legislator or senator I will be.
Okay. On that note, we will make that the last question, and we will start the final speeches for both of you. We flipped a coin prior to the debate beginning, which means for 2 minutes, Senator Ed Meyer, you have a final speech.
Thank you, Steve. Nice job. I want to borrow from Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, in a presidential debate against Walter Mondale, said as follows. He said, "I want you to know that I will not make age an issue in this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience," and I would say lack of grandchildren.
Not that young, Ed.
You got me.
I'm not that young. I look young. It's great genes.
But we are in a very serious period here in which the next 2 years are probably going to decide our economic plight in Connecticut. Patty Ann, my wife, and I got several years ago an incredible wake-up call that has driven me on this subject. Our son Andrew was a law student at UConn, and he came home one weekend and he said, "Mom and Dad, Connecticut is not going anywhere. I'm leaving." He spoke Mandarin, Chinese. He went to China. He founded a clothing company, and he came back to the United States, but he did not come back here. He went to Austin, Texas, a booming town. And what a wake-up call that was for a state senator about the problems, the economic problems that we have here. My pledge to you is that I will be the best state senator I can be in terms of turning around the economy of our state. There are many colleagues, some on both sides of the aisle, and certainly this new governor, who want to do that. It can be accomplished. And someday you're going to be proud of your state legislators and your governor in terms of bringing about that good economic result for Connecticut.
Thank you. And I would have to say, unlike Reagan's opponent then, I'm not that young, and I'm certainly much more experienced. Senator Meyer, folks, didn't start this mess. As we talked about, we're looking at a decade plus of challenges we face in the state. But he's not helped it. His exclusive focus on the environmental issues, some admirable, have left him blind to our state's economic blight. He tells you he voted against the tax increases in 2011, but that vote only came after the bill was certain for approval. And he may point to his supportive initiatives at Connecticut companies and job growth, but he has done nothing to lower the cost of doing the business in this state when the incentives run out. Senator Meyer has supported all of Governor Malloy's economic plans for Connecticut. The problem is those plans have raised taxes on Connecticut citizens and businesses and have contributed to more job loss, 9%, we're up, these aren't my numbers, and more deficits, and sadly, more folks in need of federal assistance such as welfare and food stamps. Senator has supported these plans and policies that are killing jobs and killing the chances for our own kids to stay in Connecticut, and his own son's an example, and seniors like my family, my aunt, my dad, a number of family who live right here with me, and the chances of them to pay the bills on a day-to-day basis. As long as we have one-party rule in Hartford, We are in the wrong direction, headed in the wrong direction, and that will continue, and it's completely unacceptable. It's why I'm running and why we need change. I'm the right person at the right time, folks. I will not look the other way when it comes to the economic health of our state. I will have my eyes on more than one ball and looking at the entire perspective of what is needed in the district, most importantly, this 12th district in the state, economically, fiscally, environmentally, and educationally. I have done it in Guilford and was looking way before when we faced that economic downturn in 2007, and I've said for years in Guilford, and folks know this, my record speaks, about doing long-range planning, which we're accomplishing today. I have personally felt Connecticut's economic policies as I'm a business owner with a business right here in the district, and I have the requisite skills to tackle the issues from my years as an attorney as well. This is the most crucial time in Connecticut, and if we don't get it right, we're going to continue to fall into the red. I will offer solutions, and I have specific solutions, to reduce government spending by eliminating waste and creating efficiencies just as I've done in Guilford. I will make Connecticut a much more business-friendly state for not only the businesses in the district, but the state as a whole. I will work in a bipartisan way as I've done in my entire career with the folks up in Hartford, not about Republican, not about Democrat, not about independent, but about all of them. And I will never hesitate to talk truth to power, whether it's Governor Malloy or my own party's leaders. This is my state, and as I told you earlier, I want my state back. That's why I'm running, because I want to ensure my grandparents and my parents' legacy, and I want to ensure that my children will at least have the choice to stay here. They may choose to go elsewhere, but their choice. If elected, I will work for you as I've always done, and it's this for reason I ask for your support and vote on Election Day. Thank you, folks. And thank you so much.
Thank you to both of you. Just a reminder to everyone here, vote and good night.